you'll see it says write the possible factors and equations for the given solutions. So basically, in problem 65, you were actually, for homework, when you were using the zero product property, you were finding these answers. You were finding the x-intercepts. So now they're giving you the x-intercepts, and you have to work backwards and say what were the factors and what was the original equation. Okay, so now you're given the final answer. You have to, now arrive at what the factors were. You can work backwards, of course. So if the factor here, or the answer, I'm sorry, is -2, the factor had to be x plus 2. So you're just using the opposite sign. Because when you set this equal to 0, subtract 2, you get -2. If the answer is +4, then the factor had to be x minus 4. Okay, so just simply work backwards. And I'm going to show you how to do it, which you really already know how to do if it's a fraction. So let's say you had a fraction in here instead of these integers. So let's say I gave you 3/4 and 5/6. And I say what was the original factor. Okay, so just like when we do the x method, we start from the bottom up, you would do the same thing. You would just say 4x, and since this is positive, you would say -3. Start at the bottom, and you might want to even write this example down, 6x minus 5. So since you guys already know how to do that bottom up with the fraction, it's really the exact same thing, except for you take the opposite side. So since both of these were positive, you would make both of these negatives. Okay. All right, so let's finish this because we've only gotten the factors. Now we have to come up with the equation. So how do you think I can get the equation for this? Okay, Zoe? Yep, just multiply it out. That's all you do. So once you have the two factors, okay, notice I said factors. Factors are things you multiply together to get a product. So now you're going to get the product by multiplying, by foiling this out. So x times x is x squared. X times -4 is -4x. Okay, 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times -4 is -8. And then you combine your middle terms together. X squared minus 2x minus 8. Okay, so it all ties together. Okay, so you can go from one to the other. If you're missing one, you should be able to, if you have the quadratic equation, you should be able to factor. If you have the solutions, you should be able to get the factors. So let's do number 66. So since both of these are positive, a +3 and a +6, so we use the opposite sign and say x minus 3 and x minus 6. Okay, FOIL this out. X squared minus 6x minus 3x plus 18. Simplify. X squared minus 9x plus 18. Now it says you can verify on your calculator. So that simply means if you type this into the y equals, and you can check to see if, and you can go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm not going to be showing that up here. But if you type it in, and this would be a good check for you, you go to the table, and these intercepts that are 3 and 6, so either you can read it off the graph if it graphs, or you can go to the table and make sure 3 pairs up with 0 and 6 pairs up with 0. Okay, and that's how you know that your equation is correct. So if you're taking your SOL test and you're not sure, okay, you definitely want to be sure. This is a way that you could check it with your calculator. Okay, hold on. So I'm going to have you do number 69. Actually, let me do 69 just because there's only one answer. So when it's one answer, you're just going to write it twice. So since this is a +4, you're going to write that as x minus 4 times x minus 4. Okay, same thing you would do over here to number 70. You would say x plus 8 times x plus 8. Okay. And then you can FOIL it out from there. Now, when it says a 0 here, see how you have this 0? So that means you had a factor on the outside like x. And then the other factor is x minus 3. Okay, because you would set x to 0 and then the x minus 3 to 0 and get those two answers. Okay, so this would be x squared minus 3x. Same thing for the other one. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the quadratic formula. Okay, that's going to be on page, what page number is this one here? All right, so go to page 12. Actually, let me look at page 11. So 11 we talked about the last time. That was just going over the discriminant and how the discriminant can tell you how many solutions you have. So this piece right here, which we call the discriminant, that was our last lesson, that's going to be part of the quadratic formula. So if you go down to the bottom, go back to page 11, go down to the very bottom of page 11, you actually see the quadratic formula. Okay? This quadratic formula here, notice this piece that's under the radical is the discriminant. Okay, which is, like I said, the lesson we talked about the last time. So the discriminant basically tells you how many solutions you have. If the discriminant comes out positive, you have 2 solutions. Comes out negative, that means it's not touching the x-axis at all. If it comes out to equal to 0, it's touching it 1 time. So I want you to notice something in this particular formula. This we have already discussed as well. Okay, where have you seen x equals the opposite of b over 2a? What is that called? Axis of what? Right, that's the axis of symmetry. So basically putting the discriminant and the axis of symmetry together, you have the quadratic formula. Of course, they added the radical as well. Okay, now I'm going to show you what the plus and minus thing means in front of the radical, because that's how you separate your answer into 2 parts. Okay. All right, so here's our quadratic formula. We're going to actually transfer it over to page 12. And the quadratic formula is just another method to find the x-intercepts. So when you're taking a test, if you're not asked to use a certain method to find the x-intercept, you can use whatever method you like. So if I don't say solve by factoring, and I just say solve the quadratic equation, because solve means you're looking for x-intercepts, you can use the quadratic formula. Okay, a lot of people find the quadratic formula, once you learn it, it's pretty easy to follow, and then they don't have to worry about factoring to get the x-intercepts. They just use the quadratic formula. Okay, so at least you'll have an option. Now, on my particular test that you take, I will give you, specific directions, and then I'll say choose whatever method you like. So you'll have to show me that you can apply the quadratic formula. You'll show me that you have to, know how to apply factoring as well, and then I'll give you a section where you can use whichever method you like. Okay. Now, in your SOL test, they will not be that exact. They will just say solve it. So that means you can use whatever method you like. Okay, because they don't know what method you're using to get your answer, so they can't require that you just solve by using the quadratic formula. All right, so we're going to identify A, B, and C. And we're looking at this first problem. So A is 1, B is -8, and C is 16. Okay, so that's standard. Okay, we know when we have it written in standard form, your x squared term is your A, so forth, B, and C. So now we're going to do the discriminant, because this says do the discriminant first. So we're going to write b squared minus 4ac. And then we just simply put in the numbers, but when you substitute in the numbers, you have to use parentheses. There's no exception to that. So -8 squared 4 times parenthesis 1 times parenthesis 16. So on your calculator, you're just going to go to a blank screen, not the y equals screen, and you're just going to type that in with the parentheses. If you drop the parentheses, guys, you will get the wrong answer. Okay, so make sure you're putting these values in parentheses. So if someone can tell me what they have as their answer. Okay, what'd you get? Okay, did everybody get 0? So that means you have one solution. Okay, so we already know that we're looking for one answer when we are using the quadratic formula. So now we're going to go down to this part here where it says the quadratic formula. We're going to write the formula down first. X equals, because they're x-intercepts, the opposite of b. Okay, I'm going to do that part first, divided by 2a, plus a minus, and I'm just going to put 0 here. Well, actually, I'm not going to put 0. I'm going to actually put b squared minus 4ac. The next step, I'll substitute in what that value is. So let's write the formula first. All right, so now on my next line, I'm going to actually put in the numbers. So the opposite of the b term would be a positive 8 plus a minus. Square root of 0. We've already done that right up here. Divided by 2 times 1. Okay. So the square root of 0 is pretty easy. That's just 0. So this is where you separate your answers. So I will write them as 8 plus 0 divided by 2. So this is where you separate the plus and the minus. And x equals 8 minus 0 divided by 2. So you can tell you're going to get the same answer. We already knew that because it said at the top, one solution. So I just need to write it once. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And you use your set notation to write 4. And that should be, that's it. That's all you do. I'm not going to ask you to do a sketch. Okay. I think the only thing I'm going to ask you to do for this part down here, instead of sketching it, just give me what the vertex would be. Okay, so just give me the vertex point. I don't need you to sketch it, but give me the vertex point. So how do you do the vertex point? Okay, you would do the x, we've already done it right here. X equals the opposite of b over 2a. So x equals the opposite of b over 2a is just really 8 divided by 2, which is what? 4. Go in your table and find out what it pairs up with in the table, and then you'll have your vertex. So go ahead and type it in. Okay, type that in, and then tell me what the y-coordinate is to the vertex. All right, so we'll start off with the discriminant again. B squared minus 4ac. We'll put in the value of a up at the top as -5, x as 1, and c as 1. Okay, we'll use parentheses for our substitutions. 1 squared minus 4 times -5 times 1. Okay, I'll wait for an answer. Yes. All right, so we got 21. How many people got 21? Okay, very good. Now we're going to go down to our quadratic formula. Now, since I wrote it over here, I'm not going to rewrite it. I'll just go ahead and start with the actual numbers. X equals, okay, the opposite of b will be what value? All right, so -1 plus a minus the square root of 21 divided by 2 times, what is the a value? -5. Okay, now, by me knowing that this is 21, how many solutions should I have? I should have 2 solutions. Okay, so now we're going to go down and just do the math. Now, since 21 is not a perfect square, we're going to just round to the hundredths place. So if you would find out what the square root of 21 is on your calculators, please, and let me know. All right, 4.58. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to say x equals -1 plus 4.58 divided by -10. That's the 2 times the -5. Then we're going to do the other one as -1 minus 4.58 divided by -10. Now, when you're doing this in the calculator, if you don't write it as a fraction, please make sure when you do -1 plus 4.5, hit enter first before you then divide by the -10. If you don't, you're going to get the wrong answer. Okay, so do your numerator, hit enter, and then divide by the -10. So can someone give me the first answer? Okay. Okay, so -0.358, so we'll say 36 since we're rounding to the hundredths. Okay, can someone give me the answer for the second one? Okay, Alex. Okay, 0.558, so that'll be 0.56. Okay, and then you just use your little set brackets to put both of your decimals in. Doesn't matter which one you write first. Okay. All right, so down here I said I just want the vertex. Okay, I don't need you to sketch, just give me the vertex point. So remember that the x divided by the opposite of b divided by 2a is really this part right here. Here's the opposite of b, and here is your 2a. So that's going to be a positive 1/10. So you might want to see what 1/10 is as a decimal. Okay, can someone tell me what 1/10 is as a decimal? 0.1. So now you're going to plug in your y equals, put in the equation. You're going to change the table set to 0.1 and tell me what the y value is. Okay, so I'll give you, okay. All right, so 1.05 for y. So I'm going to have you guys walk through the third problem here. So you're going to just simply follow exactly the same process, identify A, B, and C, find your discriminant, and then do the quadratic formula. Okay, so I'll give you a second to do that.